So I have been studying a little bit more about blood types, and I found it fascinating to learn about the origins and the difference in personalities and how the biochemistry of each blood type is affected by the DNA of our ancestors. And really, lastly, was the diet that actually attracted me to this study of this. So today I want to share with you the personality of type O, and then I will do type A and type B, and then we can go and talk about food. But today, just the personality and how chemically our bodies function differently. So O's are the original. So they are the first blood types, and they are a recessive gene, meaning you have to get one from mom and one from dad. So you are always a pure O. You're not like ever a hybrid. And this will make sense later when we talk about diet, because when you're a pure whatever blood type, it's easier to fit in the diet, whereas when you have a mix, then you can kind of lean towards one and the other. But the O's are recessive, so they are just one from dad, one from mom. You're a pure O. So it's estimated, I mean, the people think that it came around Africa. So it originated in Northeast Africa, and they were the hunter-gatherers. So they hunted and they ate whatever the land had. They did not cultivate, they did not plant. They walked a lot. They lived in small communities, tribes. So they had a very big sense of community. If you think about this anthropological background, it gives you an idea into how the personality of the type O is. So these are people that would walk a lot. They would have to hunt a lot and run and hide and climb and fight for their lives, like literally fight, kill other people, kill animals. So they are strong. Like they have stamina. They have a lot of endurance. They have physical force. And typically, right, originally, before you don't, let's think that everything that I say here is back then, when there were no toxins, bad diets, environment, electromagnetic pollution, pesticides, herbicides messing with their gut, messing with their mental health, it was just how it was supposed to be, right? People would wake up with the sun, go to sleep when it was dark. They would eat what the land gave them without any hormones, pesticides. So it was the pure expression of the DNA without the interference of the environment. So many of the traits here that I'll say, maybe you know somebody that's type O and they're like, well, this person is not like that. For example, I can give you the example of my mom. Like type O's are typically they have a lot of endurance. They can go on long walks or runs, and they can pick up a lot of weight at the gym. But that is if you are healthy, right? If you are doing this since you were born, then your body is prepared for that. But if you never train, if you don't eat well, if you don't sleep well, obviously you're not going to perform like that. Okay, let's just keep that in mind, even considering the psychological traits of personality, because environment is very, very powerful. Our gut environment is very, very powerful on our mental health. So obviously I'm talking here about the typical type O back way then, before the environment could ruin our genes by epigenetics. So these people, I'm going to list you a couple of the traits. Oh, one interesting thing, they make up more than half of the population. And so they are the longest living ones as well. The people that live more are typically type O. And obviously, if they were the original and they're still around and making more than half of composing more than half of the world population, obviously they can live longer. They're very resistant. And the reason for that is because since they don't produce antigens, and I don't have time to explain what that means, but they have very tolerant immune systems. And that is why, one of the reasons why the O people are not being as attacked by the coronavirus, but they also survived all the plagues, right? If they compose more than half of the world population and they were the first ones here and they're still here and there's still more than half of them here, that is because they have survived all the viruses, all the infections that the world went through the ages. So they do have very tolerant immune systems. They have a very good digestive system as well, extremely good. So in terms of personality, they are very convincing people. They are intuitive. They are primitive. So they act as animals in the good way and in the bad way. So they can be very violent and angry and explosive, but also at the same time, they're very playful and they can do things very instinctively. Okay. They are pacifists. So they like to keep the peace. And there are also those types of people that just kind of go with the flow. They don't like to plan very much. And I think this really brings us back to, it was, they would just go out and try to find an animal. You can't really plan for the time that the animal's going to be there, as opposed to the type A that they were like planting people. They were farmers, so they have to have everything planned, and the seasons and the time that you plant, the time that you sow, the time that you fertilize. So the O's are more, let's go with the flow. They like to keep the peace, obviously, because if they just wanted to fight, they would just die. They also really like community. They don't like to be alone. And this also is very understandable because in the wilderness, if you're alone, you die. So they do not like to be alone. They like to be in close-knit communities. They're very optimistic. They're independent. Although they like to be in community, they are independent. They're generous, creative. You have to be creative if you're trying to hunt with just a stick, right? So they're very convincing. I said that. They like new technologies and scientific discoveries. They like these new things. They like to respect other people's ideas. They tend to be a little bit more open and not as closed as the type A. They are very emotional. They are very self-confident, extrovert, and patient. Obviously, I think you had to be patient to wait for an animal to show up for you to hunt it. They have an objective very clear in their minds. And in terms of, and they like to work under pressure. They thrive with physical and mental stimulation. So exercising for these people has to be heavy weight lifting, has to be HIIT workouts and things of high intensity and high impact and high weight and high force. Also the mind, they can't be doing. So this is interesting for you to know, even like to hire somebody. So you don't want to put a type O in a boring job that they're just stamping papers, because it's going to drive them out of their mind. They need to be stimulated intellectually. And the same with exercise. Their bodies thrive more and gain more mass, muscle mass, and have more health if they're doing strenuous exercise. And again, I repeat, this is for the classical type A that is conditioned, that is healthy. Obviously, you're not going to get somebody that's bedridden, type O. Sorry, I said type A, right? Type O. And you're not going to put them to lift 500 pounds in the gym, obviously. Then it's interesting to see how chemically we are so different in terms of blood types. I'm sorry about this, the girls are playing. So the type O's, they have a very active enzyme that converts dopamine into adrenaline. And this means that they have very low dopamine. And dopamine is something that gives you vitality. And it's the precursor of serotonin, which makes you feel good and fends off depression. So when you have low dopamine, you have problems in maintaining focus, in having libido. You don't have as much motivation. You can have deficits of attention. Very low dopamine in the frontal lobe can lead to Parkinson's disease as well. Dopamine will give you that feel-good sensation and vitality and all that. So you can have problems with memory, functional memory, like of learning tasks that are automatic. And this is when it's like really advanced, right? When you have very, very low dopamine. So these people tend to have a little lower dopamine because they have this enzyme. On the other hand, they have a lot of adrenaline. So the anxiety of these people is completely different than the anxiety of a type A, for example. The anxiety of a type O is related to them having a lot of adrenaline. So they're angry, they're explosive, they have rage. And so they can have lack of concentration because they're so adrenaline. And what else did I say? They can be irrational in their reactions because of this adrenaline. So the other thing, so you see how it's important to know the blood type, and even in order for you to treat a depression, because if the depression is because of low dopamine and thus low serotonin as well, right? Because dopamine is the precursor of serotonin, then you're giving them an SSRI, or a serotonin reuptake inhibitor, that'll help them. Whereas in a type A, our depression is not because of lack of serotonin. It's because of other things. It's because of excess cortisol. So you giving them an SSRI might not really work a lot. You have to manage their cortisol. Isn't that interesting? So another thing that the O's have is that they have a tendency of having hypothyroidism. And that's the reason behind that is because they cannot capture iodine a lot. Meaning absorb and utilize iodine as well. And we need iodine to make our thyroid hormones. So these O people tend to be hypothyroid. If they're not careful, if they're not eating enough iodine, you know, all that. What else? So these people, there is a very, very high prevalence of profound depression in type O's because of this lack of dopamine and thus lack of serotonin as well. They have a high prevalence also of bipolar depression and manic depression. And some people can have Parkinson's disease as well. And schizophrenia as well, which is weird because schizophrenia is a lot of dopamine in the frontal lobe. So I don't know how that relates, but I guess, I don't know. They also cannot break down the catecholamine, so they can't get rid of adrenaline as well. So one, they make more. Two, they cannot get rid of it as well. And it's interesting to know that as well, because you can implement, for example, a strategy of transcendental meditation that is shown in studies to reduce the levels of catecholamines in the blood. So maybe that type of meditation will help them manage this excess adrenaline and kind of settle them down a little bit. And if you think, nature is very smart because you need to have adrenaline to run, so your heart beats faster and to fight and flight, right? What else? Okay, they have also a deficiency in an enzyme called MAO, monoamine oxidase, and this enzyme will break down the norepinephrine, serotonin, and dopamine in the brain. And when they don't break those down, those accumulate and they can cause phobias, depression, drug abuse, violent behavior, attention deficit. And it's funny because for these people, the red meat can help modulate this. This can stabilize their mood because of this enzyme. When you eat meat, you produce the bacteria in your gut produce this enzyme. And these people also produce more alkaline phosphatase, which is an enzyme in your intestines that is responsible for breaking down proteins, but it's also responsible for capturing more calcium. So the type O's have less fractures, less bone fractures. They tend to have stronger bones because of this better enzyme, better functioning enzyme in their body, as opposed to type A's, which do not have this enzyme as well functioning. What else? They have very good digestion, so they have a lot of stomach acid, and obviously that is very smart of nature to give people that only eat meat as the staple of their diet, and some roots and some berries and some fruit, but mainly animal protein with a lot of fat. They didn't eat just the lean meat, they would eat the animal head to tail, right? So they needed a lot of stomach acid to break that down, and these people do have very good digestions. And they can digest meat better. But we can ruin this, right? We can not chew well. We can be nervous all the time. We can not eat a lot of processed foods and then damage your gastric mucosa. And then you can actually have low stomach acid because of your environment. But your DNA is built to give you more stomach acid. So this was what I wanted to bring today for type O's, and how interesting it is that our DNA comes from way back when and still manifests today. And let me know if the personality traits or even if these little health things that I mentioned resonate with any of you that are O.